Well, hello everybody. My name's Jonathan Taylor. I'm the Technical Marketing Manager for Civil Survey Solutions. Welcome today to our technical webcast, Civil 3D Templates 101. In a very short second, I'm going to introduce you to Todd Brewster. Todd, are you there?
JT?
Fantastic. Excellent. So Todd has been with the business two different guises, but in his current guise, you're our application engineer and certainly the Civil 3D guru. Some of you may have seen his name dotted around on, funnily enough, the Civil 3D templates that we have distributed over the years to our customer base. So he's got extensive knowledge of this particular area, and today he's really going to sort of be dipping his toe into the world of Civil 3D templates, and certainly with the styles and settings. Todd, I'll hand over to you. I'll be in the background answering the Q&A. So yeah, we'll leave it to yourself.
Cool. Thank you very much, JT, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So this is going to be a 101 look into Civil 3D templates. So we're only going to look at the basics. We're going to look at the elements that make up the various pieces of your template and specifically the Civil 3D aspects of it. Starting with a thought out and comprehensive template is essential. Not only does it contain all the basics that you have in your drawing, your layers, your textiles, your blocks, but it also contains all of the controls you have for your Civil 3D elements as well. So in the next hour, we're going to look at the fundamental pieces that make this up. We're going to look at these controls, and we're going to look at how we impact our Civil 3D objects with the styles and settings throughout the system. How does it work? Everything in Civil 3D is a civil engineering object. All of those objects can be displayed in a certain way and have certain parts that make up what that object looks like. You use an object style to control what you want to show for the object that you're looking at the time. The way you label the object and what it looks like is you use a label style. You can also access information of your objects in table form, and you use table styles to control what they look like and what content is included in those. And all of the object creation commands can be configured. This is from the drawing settings and the command settings for the various objects throughout the system. Civil 3D will check for styles and settings in existence in the drawing when you open it. If there aren't any, it will actually create them. It'll create a very basic version of one, and they won't necessarily be the way you want to see them. So starting with the right template, the way you want your styles and settings to be, is crucial to your design process. Okay, so what are we going to look at today? We're going to start off, we're going to look at a quick overview of the styles and settings related to surfaces and alignments. It's not going to be a comprehensive look at them. It's just an introduction of what's possible to make the process of an object style, a label style, a table style. They're all actually the same for most objects. It's really the content that changes. So the processes I show you today, you can actually extrapolate out to most objects throughout the whole software. So we're going to start off looking at the interface, the levels of control that you've got. Then we'll start at the very top, the drawing settings. Then we'll have a look at some civil surface styles. Then we'll look at some surface labels. Then we'll look at some surface tables. Then we'll have a look at alignment styles, alignment labels, and then we'll look at some mechanisms to transfer these things around from drawing to drawing. All right, so let's get started. The drawing I am using today is based off the Civil Survey Solutions template. I've made a few modifications to suit the presentation, but in essence, it is our drawing template, and that actually is available on our website. So if anyone wants to get their hands on the template, you can actually download it from the Civil Survey Solutions website under resources, and then it's Civil 3D resource materials.
Todd, yeah, just to add on to that, the final slide at the very end of this webcast, I will show everybody where you can find a copy of this template.
Great, thank you, JT. Okay, so how do you get to settings? So most of you would be familiar with the prospector from the toolspace. This element here, this is your Civil 3D compendium, your friend. This contains everything you make when you make Civil 3D objects. But it's actually more than that. It actually contains all of the setting controls for your civil objects and all of the style controls for them as well. So it may or may not be turned on, and if it's not on, you can access the settings tab, which normally sits in this position where my cursor is on the screen. If it's not on, you can come into view, and over here you can turn on and off the tool space with this button, same as the one I used on the first panel. But these 4 panels here are actually all the controls for pieces of the tool space. So this one's the settings, and these 2 are related to the survey and the toolbox, which we're not going to talk about today. So the trick I actually found is you actually click on that button, and it'll actually turn on your tool space and turn on your settings tab and switch you straight to your settings tab. So that's my first tip of the day. Next tip, this tool space is movable, it's dockable. You can link it into the side of your drawing. You can move it to another screen. If you've got multiple screens, best tip, move it to a second screen so it can give you your drawing space for you to work in, and your tool settings can all be sitting on the other side. All right, so the settings tab is laid out in a similar way to the prospector. It's a tree of information. The difference is it lists every object type that is capable of being created in the software. So it will list everything you can make, and you can configure everything from here. Like the prospector, it is a right click to access everything. So if you want to access a command, you select it, right click, and then there's your creation commands or editing commands, depending on what you're doing. At the very top of the tree is the drawing settings, which is the drawing name itself. That's where you start. As I said, it's a hierarchy of control. So you change things at the very top, you can impact everything below it. So let's have a look at drawing settings. So if I right click on the drawing name, go drawing settings, it will open up my drawing settings. There's a few tabs in here. So the first tab I'm going to talk about is units and zones. So this one here is where you actually set the base units for your drawing. So the units here is not the same as the AutoCAD units. That's where you can set your units for your block insertion and so forth. This one is really about whether or not you're running Civil 3D in imperial or metric, because you only get choice of feet or meters. So Australia's been metric for a very long time, so I would be suggesting you leave it on meters. Scale. This scale here is what scale is used in the model space to represent all of your objects in terms of scaling, and actually ties directly to the drawing scale down here. So if you change one or the other of these, they correlate to each other. So this is just your default. Zone, if you had a specific coordinate zone you wanted to use, this is where you could preset it in your drawing so that it is available every time you make a new drawing file off the template that you've created. All right, object layers. So this one is actually the source layers for all the objects when they're created. So when Civil 3D makes something, it will look at the layer listed here, use that for the object creation. Now, the only one that's missing in this list is points. They're actually controlled at a lower level at the object level from an element called a description key set. So one of my colleagues, Jack, did a webcast on this a couple of months ago, I think it was, and he went into a great detail on making points and looking at description key sets. So you could always have a look at that one if you want to look at the control for those. It's slightly different than most other elements in Civil 3D. Okay, so in the list, you can set a layer, which is your source layer, but you can actually use what's called modifiers to change the layer created for specific objects. So you get a choice. You can either set a single layer for every object type, so all alignments would be on one layer, or you could use the modifiers to use that as a source layer and modify the name of the layer that's created, so it makes a clone of it and names it uniquely, and then you have every object created on a unique layer. So the way the modifiers work, you can either modify the beginning or the end of the layer that's already defined, so prefix would go in front, suffix would go behind, and then you enter some information into the value column, and that will be added on before or after the layer that you actually nominated. If you want to use the name of the object as part of the name of the layer, then you use a star or the asterisk key. So it's what the little note down the bottom here is talking about. So I'm going to set up some layers for my alignments and my surfaces. So for my alignments, I want them all to sit on one layer, where my surfaces, I want to sit on separate layers. So I'll show you how you set it up. So for alignments, you click in the cell, and then it will give you all the layers available in the current drawing. Now, if the layer is not there, that you want to use, you can actually click on New, make a new one, which I'm going to do that for my alignment. So I'm going to make a new one called Align. I'm going to make it nice and bright so you can all see it. So I'm going to make it yellow. I'm going to set it as a continuous, sorry, not a continuous, as a center style. My line type, I'm going to have it line weighted to default. I don't want to lock it. I certainly want to have it on. I don't want to freeze it. This is a tip that I'm going to give you. If you don't change this, then every object you make using this layer will instantly be turned off, and you'll have to go and for them all. So make sure you turn that to no. And if you want to plot it, so if you actually want to see when you make a paper space, then you certainly should set that to yes. Now you can make these changes to the source layer in the drawing in the first place. Okay, so there's my layer called a line. So we click on OK, we use that. Don't apply any modifiers. I want to use that layer for everything. So my labeling, same idea. This time I'm going to use a line label just to make them different. The modifiers for that I'm not setting because, again, I want all my labels to live on a single layer. All right, so now I'm going to look for surfaces. So surfaces aren't alphabetical in terms of you don't find them here. There's no surface entry because the surfaces that we typically use for our terrain models in Civil 3D are actually triangulated surfaces. Civil 3D calls them tin surfaces. You actually need to look for the word tin surface. So tin surface here is the one I want to change. I want to change this to use seeding layer of surf. I actually want to do the same thing for the labeling. But remember, I wanted to change the layers as they're created for the object. So for my actual surface objects, I'm going to add in a suffix, and I'm going to say I just want to simply use the name of the surface as it's created and append it to the end of surf. And then the labeling, same idea, I'm going to add it to the end, but this time I'm going to go, I want to use the name, but I also just want to add in the word label. So I get a unique layer for my labels and a unique layer for my surface. All right, and you can set this for all of your object types throughout the whole software. The padlock allows you to lock the layer so that at the time of creation, you can't change which layer is being used. Drawing managers may want to use that option. But if it's left unlocked, then the user can change it at the time of creation. The other one I wanted to talk about is this option down the bottom here. Immediate, I can't even read properly, and independent layer on-off control for display components. So as I mentioned, all objects in the Civil 3D space can potentially have multiple components that make up the object. So alignments are typically made up of straights and curves, spirals, depending if you use them. You can actually specify unique layers for these in the styles when you create them. If this option is ticked on, then the visibility of all those subcomponents on different layers is not changed when the source layer is turned off. If you untick this, then irrespective of what layer and subcomponent is actually set on, it will actually turn off when the primary source layer of the object is turned on and off. It's kind of like the block behavior when you're using freeze and thaw. But this time it's different because you can control it at an object level. So for my exercise today, I'm actually going to turn it off, and I'll show you what happens a little later on when we're making some alignment styles, and you'll see what this impacts. All right. The other one I want to have a quick talk about was ambient settings. So ambient settings is your opportunity to customize the units and the entry method for the various measurement types used throughout the software. So there's a long list of things in here. For example, if I have a look at angle and direction, similar type of unit, both of them are degrees, but one of them is set to using degrees, minutes, seconds as its entry format, whereas the other one is actually set to use degrees, minutes, seconds in decimal format for its entry. So any command that calls for a direction, you would actually have to enter it in as, I don't know, 30 degrees, dot 45 minutes, and then 32 seconds or something like that. The other one, you would actually have to enter it in using the degree symbol, the minute and second symbols. So you can change this, and being the top level, this is the original defaults that is propagated down the tree. Now, if something down the tree has made a change to this, then it is what's referred to as a child override, which is what this column is all about. So you'll see that there's a little arrow here. Basically, it's telling me something below this setting, which is the very top, so pretty much anything else, is overriding what I've got set here. Now, being a parent, I can reassert my control, and I could actually override the override. Double negative means nothing, so it means that the whole thing disappears. So if you click on it, it would actually change the setting at the lower level to revert back to the control at this level. I don't actually want to do that. I'm going to leave it the way it is, but that is just an example of the child override. Okay, the other bit I was going to talk about was general. So it kind of doesn't fit in any particular unit, but it is actually kind of like the basic pieces that you may or may not want to control. And the things that I wanted to highlight here was event viewer. So the event viewer is kind of like the customizable space that Civil 3D uses to report information to you. It could be about crossing triangles or break lines in your surface model. It could be error reports when it builds a corridor or something like that. They all pop up in the event viewer, and the event viewer will automatically pop up when this option is set to yes. Now you can actually turn it off fundamentally. It doesn't mean the report doesn't happen, it just means the viewer doesn't pop up. So that's something that people may want to turn off. So you flip it to no, and then you'd never see it again. Unless you specifically wanted to see it, then you'd have to open it up from the view menu. Tooltips. So Civil 3D objects will label the important information about them. So for surfaces, it'd be elevations. For alignments, it'd be station and offsets or change offset. You can turn them off fundamentally at a top level. You can also do this at an object level. I'll show you that shortly. If you don't want to see them at all, turn it off here. The other one is the new entity tooltip state. Kind of goes hand in hand with this one. So as an object is created, the tooltips are turned on when this setting is set to on. If it's set to off, then new objects aren't having their tooltips turned on and off. Sorry, aren't turned on, and you have to manually turn the tooltip on for an object if you want to see it. So you can control these things at the top, but you can also control these things at a lower level. Just as a side note, this independent layer is actually the exact same option as this. It's just a different place to control it. All right, so let's apply all those changes. Let's have a look at some of the other things here. So label style defaults. So everything in Civil 3D that can be made as a label actually uses the AutoCAD text styles already set up in the drawing as the source font for the labels. And then being the top level, I can impose a label font throughout my whole system. And then I could change it uniquely at a lower level if I wanted to. So let's see if I can explain that a bit better. Labels. So if I go to labels, currently the software is using ISO-CP as the text style for all the labels, except for some that are probably overridden. I've actually got a style in here called Civil, which is my Arial font. I want to apply that to all labels. So I actually change the control here and I override the override, which will mean every label in my drawing will now use Civil as its text style. Now this doesn't apply to anything else. It doesn't apply to your tables. It only applies to your labels. You can also control the behavior of other elements of your label. So down here, we can look at things like plan readability, which I will talk about in detail later on, but essentially allows you to force the labels to flip as the rotation exceeds the bias, which in this case is 95 degrees. The components, you can actually control the text size of all of your labels from this point. So by default, I've got most things set at 2.5 millimeters. Now, I need to do a bit of a side note here. Text height for labeling in Civil 3D is all dynamic. So you always specify it as a height in millimeters for metric, and I guess it would be in inches or feet for the imperial one, because the software will interrogate the current viewport scale, whether it be in model space or the viewport scale that you've set through a model space, and use that to rescale the label to achieve the height specified here. So that means if you have a viewport at 1 to 100 and 1 to 500, the label would look identical in each. Everything else would look smaller and bigger, but the label would be sized automatically to make the height. So this is where you can impose a height throughout your entire system. I don't actually want to. I quite like 2.5 mils as my default text height, and then I change the ones I want later on. The other one is leader and drag state. So every label can be dragged. So it has its as composed layout, which I'll elaborate on in a little bit further on when we make some label styles. But you can also drag it out into a different state. And this allows you to impose control over what that drag state would look like in terms of the leader and then the components. So you'll notice here that the arrowhead size has been locked at 2 mils, and then the padlock here is allowing me to force that throughout the system to always be 2 mils. I cannot change it when I'm at a lower level. I'd have to come up to the parent level here and change it at this level. If I untick that, then you could override at various levels if you wanted to. You can also configure how the text is composed when it is dragged. So you can leave it the way it is when you initially define it in the label, or you can tell the software to stack it. And by default, most things are set to stack. I'll illustrate that one again when I get to making a label, but this is where you can impose control. All right, let's make all those changes happen. And then let's have a chat about object feature settings. So that's the drawing settings, that's the global top. Next level down, you would actually do the same types of things for an object level. So for example, alignments. If I click on here and I go edit feature settings, very similar format in that it shows me all of my ambient controls, but then it shows me some stuff that's probably a bit more unique about the object you've selected. In this case, stuff about default styles for alignments, things like that. So you would get different lists of information depending on which object type you pick, but you can customize up here at an object level things that you want to happen to just that object. So one thing that I do want to make mention of is this concept of station. So I've used the word station a couple of times. I've used the word change a couple of times. Software works on the concept that station is an American term, but it is an American term for change. So what we would call change, the United States calls station. It's interchangeably used in the software, but the really big point I want to talk to you about is in terms of the format for stations, and this can happen at the very top as well. If you're ever getting stations looking like pluses and minuses and weird numbers, that's actually station format. It's like, 100 would be 1 plus 0, 0. That's when this format's set to station format. So that would be something like this here. So if you're getting that stuff happening in your drawing, that's because the format has been changed or has come from an imperial drawing. Typically, you just need to flip it back to decimal and then you would get changes the way we would normally anticipate them to be. So 100 would be 100. All right. So just like object style defaults, you can also do the label style defaults at an object level. So for alignments, just to illustrate the point about what I made with changing the style to civil, for alignments, I'm actually going to revert it back. I'm actually going to flip it back to the ISOCP. So all my alignment labels are going to look different to all of my other labels in the drawing. And when you do that, it'll confirm to you with this little tick box saying that you are overriding. Notice there's another child column here. It's because there's actually another level of control. And there's actually 3 levels of control for this hierarchy. It starts at the top at the drawing level, then it goes to the object level, and then it can come down to the command level. All right, so if we click on that, that will apply that to our, so when we start making alignment stuff, you'll see the text style being different to what we did in our surfaces. All right. That's the interface, that's the basic arrangement for controls. Let's actually look at making a style. So we're going to start with surface styles. So surface is a good example of the typical arrangement for the information in the settings view. So in here you have the style for the object you're potentially looking at, how you're going to label the thing, how you're going to put some tables of information together, and then commands. You'll find that almost all of the object types in Civil 3D are formatted the same way. They may have more information in there, there may be more label styles, there may be more surface styles available, object styles available that might need to be configured, but the basic layout is the same. So let's make a new surface style. So we click on surface, we go new, it'll pop up a form. I'll start on the left. So the layout of these forms is actually consistent, it's deliberate, it's to make it so that the software is easier for you to configure things up. There is generally always an information tab, there is always a display tab, and there's always a summary tab. Bits in between will vary depending on the object type that you're actually looking at. Information is pretty basic. This is where you get to name things. Here's another tip. Name them unique, because when you're picking the styles, it's just a list. So make sure your description of your name is unique enough for you to be able to identify what it is. So for today, we're just going to go something simple, and we're going to go for survey. And I'm cheating by putting the underscore in the front so it goes to the top of my list, makes it easier for me to pick. Description is completely and utterly user definable and user unique. It's just a notation for you to describe what you did in your style creation. You don't have to fill it in. Over here, it's all programmatic set about who created it, modified, and when they did that. All right, I'm going to jump across to display first. We'll talk about the this arrangement. So display is essentially now talking about the elements of the object, how you want to show them in the drawing. So depending on the object you pick will depend on what component is available. And for surfaces, there is a bundle of things that is available to be shown. The intention is never for all of these things to be on at once. You would probably get a nice jumbled mess in the drawing. The other one I wanted to have a quick chat about was this view direction at the top. There are typically 3 different view directions. There is plan, which is your 2D top-down view. There is model, which is your 3D view, so model view or something like that. And then section, so when it's in like a profile or a section view, you can change what the objects will look like. Now, I would imagine most people's plans are 2D plans from the top. So when you're making changes to these things for those plans, coloring something the way you want it, make sure your view direction is on plan. All right. So for the surface style I want to make, I'm just simply going to turn on my major and minor contours. It's just going to be a simple contoured surface. I'm going to make some colors in here that make it look easy to see on the screen. So I'm going to go an orangey color for my major, and I'm going to go a bit darker for my minors. Everything else I'm going to turn off. And that's it for the things I want to change. The only other comment I want to make was layer. So if I leave this thing set to layer 0, just like a block, it'll inherit the properties of the layer it's created on, but it'll color things, line type scale, weight will be based on the table here. If you want unique layers for each subcomponent, then you can actually specify them here. You click on the cell, get the list, pick the one you want. We won't do that for our surface, but we will do it for an alignment. So I'll show you how that works when we get to alignments. All right. So I'm showing contours, so I need to control the contours in my drawing. So that's what the contour tab's for. So for contours, I'm going to set them as an interval of 0.2. So I want my majors at 1, which remember the relationship, so I flipped it up. And I'm an engineer, not a surveyor, so I'm more than happy to apply some smoothing. And you can flip the smoothing mode into one or the other. If it's on add vertices, you can use this tracker across the bottom to increase and decrease the amount of smoothing. All right, let's make our style. So if I click out there, you'll see now I've got a new style living in my drawing for survey. Now, before we actually make the surface, I want to have a quick chat about command settings. So command settings are essentially your ability to customize up what happens when a command runs. So for a surface, it's actually create surface. So if you click on the element and then you click on the edit option, again, the format is very similar to what you get for everything else. There's a consistency here, but this time there will be elements that are unique to the command you pick. So in our case, it's surface creation. And the one I wanted to have a chat about was the surface default type, which is tin, which is triangulated irregular networks, what you would normally make your surface models out of. The name format. This is your opportunity to preset what the names are when your surfaces are created, and this applies to all other object types. You can give the thing a prefix, in this case it's surface, and then there's this next counter, which is like a little bit of automatic text that jumps in. And it actually is starting at 2 because there's already been a surface created in here once. I don't want that, I want to start at 1. So I come back in here and I flip it back to 1. That means it resets my numbering to 1. So if you're ever creating things and the numbers are not creating the way you think, you're up to like surface 15, you can come in here and actually reset the numbering. All right, you can actually jump the increments at whatever you want, but it kind of makes sense to me to make it as start at 1, increment by 1. All right, we click on OK, and I'll minimize up some of this stuff. Let's actually go and make a surface. So we'll come back into here and we go and make a surface, create a surface. It's tin, Its layer is surf and a star. It's going to use my name, which is going to be surface, and it should be 1. I didn't put a description in, so it doesn't matter. Style, we're going to flip out and use our new style for survey. Click OK, click OK. Makes me my surface. Now we have to add some data to it. So I've got some triangles sitting in the drawing here that we can use. So we come over here and we add our triangles to our surface, and then we turn it back off again to make it a little less cluttered. And now I have my surface colored the way I asked, showing me my contours at 0.2 intervals. My majors are the bright yellow and my minors are the brown, I guess you call it. If I bring up the properties of this, click on it, the layer it's created it on is surf-surface01, which is named off my template using my source layer. The color is as per the source layer's color. Now, when I made this surface, I left the line type as by block, and that was deliberate. Because if I wanted to change the display of this thing, I perhaps wanted these lines to be dashed, I can actually just come straight to my object's line type and just come in here and say I want to make it dashed. And then it will change just this surface to be dashed. So when you use by block as the source type for something, it will resort to the object level setting for that element, so line type or layer or something like that. If that doesn't exist, then it will use the layers version of that, which is why this was continuous initially, because surf-ns-01 was continuous until I changed it to my dash. So that's important, because you can actually control your elements uniquely, even though they might live on the same layer. All right, let's have a look at putting a label on this. So we're going to make a spot label, and we do that by going back to settings, and then we look at our label styles. So for surfaces, there are actually multiple label styles. You could label contours, you could label slopes, spots, and even a watershed, which is one of the analysis types of the surface. I'm going to look at a spot label just to illustrate how the label creation mechanisms work. So just like when I made the style for the surface, I go edit label style. We come in here. Oops, that's not what I want, sorry. I go new. That's the label style defaults at the object level. Let's call this thing spot. And same thing, got the different pieces here. You have a summary and a information. Everything else in the middle will vary. General is your sort of basic pieces. The style here is civil, remember, because I set that for something different for my other pieces. And orientation reference. So when you make an object label, you can orient it to the object itself. You can orient it to the view you're in, so your viewport rotation, or lock it to the world coordinate system. For points, the object is just a singular point, but for alignments that becomes important, because you can lock your alignment labels to run perpendicular and parallel to your alignment itself. Plan readability bias is locked at a high level in terms of the angle, but I do want to turn it on. I'll illustrate how that works in a sec. Layout. Layout is your world to assemble your label. Software is smart enough to know the type of label that you're creating and will create something for you. You don't have to use it. You can actually delete the pieces and start from fresh. I'm going to start with what they created. So a label can be made up of multiple components. The components are all listed here. You select the one you want to edit. The types of components varies depending on the label, but typically there's text, lines, blocks, and sometimes there's reference text depending on the label. You use that to add new pieces. This allows you to copy a current component, make a duplicate, make some changes to it, obviously delete it, and this allows you to manipulate the display order. So then the particular component selected, the properties for it are listed down the screen. So that's its name. Yep, cool. Visibility, you can create something but turn it off if you don't want to. See it in the drawing. Anchor components. So they can be anchored to each other. The first one has to be anchored to the feature, the thing you're actually labeling. So we'll leave it as that, but we're going to put it, I'm going to make a label that actually labels my spot location with my coordinates that sits above the point I'm labeling. So I'm actually going to set this to sit at top center. So this is the 9 sort of AutoCAD type points to define a text location. All right. Then the text is actually the components that make up the word you want. So the contents, you can actually set, you've got to click on this little button here. You can actually set that as a property of the surface. So it's already populated an entry here. This is the surface elevation. So if you want to edit this when you're in this component editor, which is common to everything, select the entry on the preview screen over here, and then the properties field here will adjust to show you the properties of the field selected. So I want to change this. I want to use it to 2 decimal places rather than 3. So I pick my precision to 2. Now, biggest tip of the day when it comes to component editing, always click on this arrow to transfer whatever you change here to here. Because if you don't do this, you don't change anything. So I click on this, and then it will take whatever setting I've got here and make the change over here. All right, so this is going to be a reduced level. So let's put a little prefix in front of it. And I'm going to put, yes.
Very quickly, just I wanted to catch you when you did the prefix, because we had a question come in about putting CH for chainage on chainage labels. And I
exactly what I'm doing right now. So you use that when you're making a chainage label. So this text component editor is just a text field. So you can use programmatic pieces over here to bring across from to be derived from the object you're labeling. But you can add and subtract text in here as much as you like in terms of normal editing. So that's how I put in the prefix of RL. So if you're doing chainage alignments, it would just be CH.
Brilliant.
I'm going to put in my easting now. So I'm going to put E as a prefix for that. And then I'm going to pick the easting coordinate of where I pick. I'm going to leave it at 3 decimal places and push it over. I can't stress enough on the push button. I've fallen into this trap a lot, forgetting to press this button. So I'm going to reinforce this every time I'm in this form. Press the button. The other one I want is my northing. We'll push that across. So once you've got the thing the way you want, click on OK. This view over here will actually give you a preview of what you set up. You can move this around. It's like a little mini view. Text type, I'm going to go something different. I'm going to go 3 mils. I'm not going to rotate the text, but you can swing the text around if you wanted to. Attachment. So this is relative from the text to the object. So I need to put the text connection to that top center piece that I asked for to the bottom center of my text label. So it's kind of marrying up the 2 pieces. But I want to shift it away a bit. So I'm going to actually add a Y offset of 5 millimeters. So it'll shift my label away. If I don't want to use the default colors, I can set them here. I want to actually add a border to this. So I'm going to turn that on. Border is rectangular, great. Don't want a background mask, but you can use that to use the drawing background to hide the elements underneath. But I'm going to make a bigger gap, I'm going to go 1.5. All right. That's what I want my label to look like. Now, drag state. Drag state, if you jump across to this one, as I said, is controlled at a higher level for the size of the arrow, but the rest of it is customizable. So I'm actually going to leave most of the defaults in here, but I do want to change the leader type to spline. I like them better, they look pretty. The text, I'm going to stack it based on the thing rather than doing the as composed, which would be as I've just laid it out. I do want a border, but I want rectangular. I want a bigger gap, and I want my text to be the same as what I was using before. All right. So let's apply all of that. And summary, I should actually briefly tell you what this is. Wherever you're in, if there's a summary, it's essentially a summary of all the previous tabs. It's just in that expandable tree form. So you could edit from here if you know what you're looking for. So yeah, that's what summary is. Enough said about that one. All right, so we've made the label. Let's go and put it in. So we come in and we say, I want to attach the surface label. Let's put it over here. Let's make some space. Surface, it is a spot. I want to use my new spot. A quick talk about marker styles. So you'll notice there's nothing in here about marker styles for surfaces. That's because they are actually a common element to multiple objects. So when you have something like that, it actually sits in general. So up here under general, multi-purpose styles, there's a thing called marker styles. So these are basic pieces that you could label a point for an alignment, for a spot point like this. You actually use in the corridors and the sections as well. So they're like a universal piece. So you control them at a higher level. All right, basic circle and cross, it's just as the name implies, a basic circle and a cross. So let's put it in and mark a point. So in here now, it has labeled it with my level I wanted. It has put my easting and northing in, and it has put the rectangle around the outside for the border. If you actually click on it and you go into your properties, you can actually control it. So maybe I didn't want that marker style. You can actually change it after you created it. You can come in here and just go, no, I don't want anything as sophisticated as that. I just want a circle. And you can make it a circle. You can even change the style itself. That rotation that I was talking about in terms of plan readability, if I actually rotate my label, as I spin around over 95 degrees, the text in the label will flip back. That's keeping it readable. So that's what I was referring to in plan readability. It applies to all your label types. The drag state, if I then grab the label and drag it off, it'll jump into drag state mode. So this one, the mask is on because it was by default. I obviously didn't change my border type from rounded. I must have forgotten to do that bit, doesn't matter. The deleter is a nice spline. So that's the drag state. You can always restore these things if you want to go back to what they were by as composed. You can just go reset label, bring them back. All right. So now I wanted to have a look at an element, an aspect of labeling that most people probably don't even know exists. It's called child labels. So it's best illustrated by an example. So let me see if I can do this. Oops, I don't want to make it. I want to actually label it. I come in and let's do it on a slope label. So we'll do slope downhill arrow. We'll add this in. We'll make it a 2-point, and we'll go from here to here. All right, so this label is currently showing it to me in a slope and just showing me to no decimal places. Perhaps I want a variant of this label that is 1 decimal place because I'm finical and I want to know that. Instead of making a clone of this and changing it, you can actually make what's called a child. So it only works for labels. You actually click on the name and then you go new, and it'll make a new child label. And it'll tell you it's a child in the thing by default. But I'm going to say this one is the same name, but 1 dp for 1 decimal point, 1 decimal place, sorry. Flip across to layout. And the way this works, this label is made up of 2 bits. So there's a direction arrow and a surface slope. So this is that component stuff, elements I was talking about. I actually want to go to the slope, and anything you change in the child, the definition resides with the child, but everything else resides with the parent. So that will happen when I do this. So I come into the slope value, remember, highlight, change the value, and then hit the arrow to push it across. Do that, create that, and then now in my list there's another one, and it sits below none to represent the parent child. I pick that, let's put a label in for that one. We'll do something very similar, except this time the label now has a decimal place on it, but the parent still can assert control. So I can actually come back to the parent, and let's just do something simple by adding in the boundary. So we come to the text and we say we want to see the border. Turn it on. Being a parent, it asserts control back over the child. So changes to the parent are reflected in the child unless the child has overridden that by changing it, which in this case, I'd only changed the decimal places. So that's that parent-child. So if you've got a lot of labels that you want to make that only have a simple change, like decimal place or something like that, make them as child labels. Much easier to manage. All right, let's have a look at making a table. So this surface here is showing currently in contours. Tables for surfaces are related to the way they are analysed. So let's analyse the surface. Actually, I'll make some room. We'll flip it out. I'm running short on time. We shall do a quick slope analysis, and then we will show that in the drawing so we can see what it looks like. And that will be slope shaded. All right. Very, very red. All right, the reason I've done that is I want to see what all these values mean, what all the different shaded colors actually represent. That's what a legend table is for a surface. So we go and create a legend table. We want to make it for slopes. We definitely want to make it dynamic. We dump it in the drawing. So that is now the table related to this slope analysis. Now you can actually access the style definition of things from the objects directly in the drawing. you simply pick it, right click and go edit. So I'm going to go edit in the table style. So table styles are kind of like an array or a matrix of labels. They are still derived from the source object that they're created from, but instead of creating a single label, you're actually creating a list of labels. So there's still an information, display, and summary. Data properties is the bit where you make all the contents of your table. So table settings, text settings, sorting, I'm hoping is pretty self-explanatory. It's the behavior of the table, the text styles applied, text heights, and what's used for sorting. Really, the nuts and bolts of it come with this bit at the bottom. So that is the heading. You can actually double click on the cell and make a change. These are the heading, sorry, that's the title. These are the headings for the columns. These are the width controls for the columns, and these are the value controls for the columns. I actually want to add in 3D area. So if I click on plus and make it a bit bigger so you can see, it adds a new column. We're going to call this thing 3D area. Oops, can't even spell. My capitals off. Area. And we are going to come in and add in from our ranges, we want the surface range 3D area. Yeah, 2 decimal places looks good. Actually, maybe we'll go 1 decimal place. I think the other one's 1, so we'll do that. I want to add a suffix in this time. I'm going to put it in as meters, and I actually want my, oops, cube symbol, so I'm going to dump in my cube symbol as well. Click on OK. The width control here, if you want to make it manual, then you can specify how wide or narrow you want the column. Automatic will automatically size it based on the content of everything in the column. Let's leave it on automatic. Display, quick chat about display. The components in here can be controlled just like they can in a object layer control. So perhaps I want to change all my line work to being white. Don't want them to be yellow, so let's go make them white. Don't want to see the fills, so we'll just turn those off, and we'll leave the rest the way it is. Click on OK. So not only has the colors changed in everything, I now have a second column of data representing the 3D area of the triangles for the various slope ranges in the analysis. All right. Let's now jump in and have a look at some alignments. All right. Flip across to settings. We'll minimize up surface. Let's go to alignments. So alignments, let's make a new alignment style. We'll come in and make new. We shall give the thing a name. We shall just call it basic. It's just going to be a simple alignment style, but I'm going to make it so that I can customize it up the way I want to see it based on an object. Markers, your alignment can be labeled up with the markers. These markers come from that same list that I talked about for the spot labels. I don't actually want any, so I'm going to turn them all off. Alignments also can label the direction of the alignment if you choose to. I'm going to use the drawing scale to scale up an arrow pointing in the right direction, but I'm going to make it a bit bigger. I'm going to make it 5. Display. So this is the component elements of an alignment. So this is the bit when I talked about object styles where they vary. So surfaces had a different list. Alignments have a different list. Every object type has a different list. I want my alignment componentry, geometry, so the line, the curve, and the spirals all to be on, but I want them all to be driven from the block in terms of color. I'll explain what that means in a minute, but basically it will assert control at an object level. I want to turn the arrow on, great, but I want to use it on a different layer. I want to put it on something I've already got set up in here called no plot, so it does not plot. But it allows me to see it. I want to make the color, let's make it 8. Don't want to see any of the other elements, turn all the extension lines off. All right, we shall save this and go and make our alignment. So we have in the drawing some polylines that I can use to make some alignments, just make it quicker. So we come in and we go create an alignment for my objects. Yep, that's good, that's good. I'm going to accept most of the defaults, the name, whatever. Style, we want to make sure it's on the one we made. Labeling, I'll leave it as it is. We'll talk about that in a minute. Conversion options, yep, that all looks great. So the software has gone through, converted my polyline into an alignment. These arcs will have been made as 50-meter radius. The color is actually coming from my layer, which I set at the very beginning to be yellow. And same with the line type. The line type is coming from the layer, and that is center. Because I set all of the elements in the display of the style for the alignment to being by block, I can actually change stuff at this level. So I can come and make the alignment red or green. I can change the display style. I can go, maybe I want to see it as dash dot. And that will impact just this object. So that's the difference between by layer and by block. When you set everything to by block, it'll use by layer initially, but you can override at an object level. It can be handy if you want to make one alignment style, but you want it to look a little different in different situations. All right. Let's talk about the alignment labels. So I'm not going to look at the great detail of making a label. It is not dissimilar to what we've looked at in the past. What I am going to talk about is how they behave in regards to alignments. So if I actually look at alignment labels, over here, they're actually a bundle of alignments label types. There are things called station, which remember is change, which actually is the information that's currently showing at the moment. That is some of my station markers or change markers. But there is also labeling that can occur on the line, the curve, and the spiral. So that's the different components of the alignment. Or there's stuff that can happen off the alignment. So it could be the change offsets or the intersect points for the tangents and the points. You can configure labels up for each of those. So when it comes to the change markers, there are actually 8 different change types that can be labeled on the alignment. The most common one you're probably familiar with would be major, maybe the minor, and the geometry points. The others are derived from potentially other elements of the alignment and other properties. A combination of these alignments together is what's called a label set, which is this piece that sits at the top. So that you don't have to come in and define what it looks like for every subcomponent, you can label up an alignment based on a set of predetermined label types and frequencies. So let's go and make a label set. We will make a new one. We shall call it basic. So these are the different types, which is matches up to here. We go major. These are the styles available within each of these pieces. So we're going to go change perpendicular. I haven't talked about these buttons before. I'm going to talk about it briefly now. These are actually your ability to make changes to the style at this point in time. So I could actually come in here and go edit current style, and it would allow me to edit that style if I wanted to make a change. I could even make a new one. This is a typical change label. So there is a tick line, which is just a tiny little marker, and then there is a change value. To answer that question from the very beginning, when I was talking about the prefixes, there is the change marker inside my change label. So it's just a piece of text that has been put in front of the value for the station. All right. I'm not going to make changes. All right, so once you pick the ones you want, you hit add and add it to the list underneath. This is the list that will be used to define the label set. But I'm going to decrease the increment on the major stations to 10. And then the other thing I want to label is just my geometry points in a similar way. And then I click on add. Now, when you're dealing with geometry points, you do get the option of which geometry points along the alignment are included. I don't want to include my start and end because they will come from my majors. And I don't want to see my midpoints on my curve. So I'm going to turn them off as well, but I want to see everything else. Click on OK, click on OK to create. And now when I come and make the other alignment, I can pick my alignment label set as part of my creation. So I can come in here and go basic is the style from last time, but here label set wise, I want basic as well. Bang. And that label set is applied at the 10-meter frequency and is also applying my tangent point ones in a different way to this one. So you can create these label sets so they're your defaults when you create things. You'll also notice that the alignment looks different. This one is still using the original alignment layer align as the color control, which is the yellow. But if I actually click on both objects, they still both reside on align. They just look different because of the controls I applied to the first one. The other thing I wanted to have a quick chat about was the that independent control that I talked about at the very beginning on the object layers. That arrow, if you remember when I made the style, was actually set on a layer called no plot. If I come up to my layer list and I actually turn off no plot, the arrow disappears. And it'll disappear on all of them because there's an arrow at each center point of each component. That's that independent control I was talking about. The subcomponent is controlled on a different layer, so that controls when it goes on and off. But if I turn the align layer off, and it looked like it hasn't done it, but that's because I need to regen the drawing, all of the pieces related to that alignment are disappearing. So those arrows are going because their control is turned on at the very beginning to say I don't want independent control on the subcomponents. The labels disappear because they only reside in the drawing if the source object is visible. If the source object is not visible, they disappear. So that's an example of how that independent and immediate layer control works. All right, let's put alignments back on. I don't think, oh, that was the last thing I was going to show you. And then I'll talk about transferring styles. I wanted to discuss how to apply that label set to that first alignment. Because I've already created it, I obviously don't have an opportunity to do it at the creation. So you can actually always change the labels on an alignment at any point. You can pick one of the labels in the drawing, right click and go edit alignment labels, and it will show you the current configuration. So I could go to the effort of changing this to make it the way I want. Or there's these buttons down the bottom. I can actually go import or save. So if you actually got one you like, you can create a brand new label set from this point and you'll make a new one rather than making it from scratch. But you can use this to apply a label set to a current object. So in this case, I want my basic. You can see all the settings that's applied. I click on OK, and it'll suddenly apply my label set to the alignment I've already created. Here's another tip for everybody. To pick labels in the drawing for an alignment, you need to hold the control key down to pick a unique singular label. So if I want to pick here, you'll see that the tangent point and the 200-meter change label are almost on top of each other. If I wanted to get rid of one, I hold the control key down and click on the one I don't like. In this case, it's the 200. I right click, I can choose to flip it and put it on the other side. Or if I don't want it, I can actually right click on it, control left click on it, and then actually just delete it. And it will kill that one label, but the rest of my labels will be retained. If you did that by clicking on one label without holding control, you'd actually kill every label. I do that and they all disappear. But you can reset your labels. So I can come back in here and reapply my labels and everything goes back. If I just wanted to get rid of that one there, I delete it and it's gone. All right, that's another little tidbit for the day. Okay, so we're getting close to the end, so I want to know there's probably some questions. I'm just going to show you some quickly on how you actually make this into a template, because we've done all this in a drawing. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You could actually just take your drawing and go save as drawing template, and you would suddenly create a drawing template off the drawing you've got. I wouldn't advise it on the one I've currently done because it's got objects already in there. All the name increments are probably increased by 1 or 2 depending on how many objects are created. But that is one way of making your template, and you could pick an existing file, replace it, or create a new one. If you wanted to just transfer some styles from one drawing to another, maybe I'll make this a little different, it looks a bit dominating, then we could use the setting space to actually do that transfer. So this is good if you've got a couple you want to transfer. If you've got lots to do, then probably not the best way to do it, but let me show you. So if I come in and actually open up a drawing template, so we'll go in here and we will open my drawing template up. I've now got 2 drawings open, and in the Civil 3D settings space, there's this control at the top about what you're actually seeing settings for. When it's on active, it's just the current drawing. When it's on master, it's actually all drawings in the drawing, available in the session. So I can actually, whichever one's bold is the current, I can actually come to my start drawing here and actually go to find that surface style, and I can drag and drop it and take it straight to my template file. And then if I actually looked in the template, now there is a style there for that one. But if you have lots of those to do, then that's going to take a bit of time. Another way you can do this, if we actually close down the template, because I don't want to change it, and I'm going to reopen it. There's actually some controls that get to do this at a global sense. So under the Manage tab in the ribbon, there is some stuff here about styles. So import allows me to drag stuff in. I'll show you that in a sec. Purge takes everything out that's not being used. Reference is a new one. Probably the last few years has been brought in. You can actually reference other files as sources for your styles and settings. So you could actually theoretically set up, if you've got multiple clients with different needs for how things are displayed, you could actually change around which one you're using as a source. Import. So when you go import, I'm going to import all of the settings that I made in the start file into my current template. So click on OK and open it up. It'll analyze the source drawing, compare it to what I've got in my current file, and it'll give me a report on everything. And because the files were saved at different times, it's probably telling me absolutely everything needs to be updated. If I clear out all the things that are just updates and conflicts, it'll actually only show me the things that I've really changed. In this case, surfaces and alignments. So if we actually look at surface and we look at the labels, you can see in here that it's telling me that my elevation label, I need to add in my new spot. And my slope label, I need to update my slope arrow because I made a change to it and include my downhill label. So you can actually, if you're happy with all those things, and you can pick on and off the things you do want to include or not, you can click on OK to proceed. One thing that you will or will not want, depending on what you're changing, if you wanted to take any settings changes that you've made, you click on Import Settings as well, and it will take your current settings across to the drawing you're importing into. I don't actually want to do that, so I'm going to turn it off. I just want to bring the styles across. So it will go, I'm about to import, you want to go? Yep. You click OK, and it will go through and it will say, I found 6 styles, I successfully imported those. So click OK, and then if I actually look in my template now, I have my survey style, I have my alignment style, I have my alignment label set. So it's dragged all of them in at once. It's probably the better way to bring everything in. All right, now that is pretty much all of the things I wanted to show everybody today, except for my very last and I think my most important tip for everybody. So creating a template from scratch can be a very long and laborious task. As JT alluded to at the beginning, I would know I created the first version of the civil survey template over 10 years ago. And I recall it taking me weeks to finish. So here's the tip. If you find a template that's got at least some of what you want, the way you like it, take a copy of it, modify it to suit your own needs rather than starting from scratch. Something like the Civil Survey Solutions template would probably be a good starting point. Then you can modify things the way you want. All right, thank you very much for watching. I know it was a bit of a whirlwind through on just some of the basic elements that you can get from a Civil 3D template, but there is a lot in here. I'm hoping this will at least scratch the surface on giving some people some ideas on some of the things you can do with the settings. JT, are there any questions?
Yeah, well, look, there were a few, most of which we've addressed during the session, actually.
Cool.
One was about adding the prefix to the label and the text composer, which is what we covered.
Covered that a couple of times, yep.
There was actually a really good question from Lee about you very, very quickly added in the meters cube symbol to a piece of text, and to a lot of people seeing that.
Let me show you what I actually did. I did it as the ASCII keys. So there are a number of ways you can add this label in. So which one did I do it in? I did it in a table.
It was on the table, yeah.
No, not alignments, I'm in the wrong thing. Surface tables. Yeah, look, there's lots of ways you can do this. I'm old school. I actually used the keys. I held the Alt key down and went 0179. And that is the ASCII key character code for the cube symbol. It was a slope table, wasn't it? And it was standard. No, it wasn't. I'm in the wrong drawing, that's why.
Oh, okay. Well, you could always just demonstrate on one of those other columns if you wanted. But
I would.
Whilst you're firing that up, go on.
I'm going to say there is another way to do it in the software as well. the software actually, here it is. Okay, so I actually typed in Alt0179 and then I put the cube symbol in. The other way you can do it is you actually come over to here and you go symbol and you go, I want other, and it'll pop open the character map, and then you could find the character you want here. So you go select, see, look, there you go, Alt0179, you go select, and then you go copy, and then you can jump back out of that, and then you could go and paste it. And
Brilliant.
oops, there you go, paste. Or you could do it the way JT talked about with the slash stuff. So there's lots of different ways to do that. I apologize, I went quickly through that bit, but
No,
that's
it was
how you
one of
did
those. Yeah, it was one of those sort of bonus features which I hadn't tweaked, and I thought, oh, you know, that's a really good point to raise. Look, in respect of questions sort of related to what you've been showing up, that was kind of really it, I guess. For those of you that are interested in grabbing the template that Todd, or the basis of what Todd was sort of developing throughout that particular webcast, you can go to the following website, and then the resources, Civil 3D resource material, and then you'll see there's a download template. So you can actually get that DWT from there. Also, there's a link to our webcast page for information. One more slide. So if you do want to grab hold of this recording, a lot of what we're talking about now will actually be cut out, so you can just really get the meat of the webcast. It'll be available on our YouTube channel, so you can search for Civil Survey Solutions. The webcasts that have been held this month are also listed here, just in case you want to go and grab the recording from YouTube. And then the following week or next week, we've got a civil site design pack mode, which is in relation to the release of a new release of civil site design due out on Tuesday next week. And then following that, we've got another one on AI, which is going to be very,
some
very
exciting stuff coming.
Exciting webcast indeed. Any feedback, please, you can give anonymous feedback on this particular link here. So if there's anything in relation to what you want to see in the future or about what you've seen today, we've got any questions surrounding that, then please get in contact with us. All that leaves me to say is thanks very much, Todd. Fantastic webcast.
No worries.
Really, really good, really concise. And thank you all for your attendance. And we look forward to seeing you very soon.